Remember the good old days when people actually used to chew with their mouths closed? I mean, even I partake in watching mukbangs every now and then, but I just don't know if I want a live action mukbang, if you know what I'm talking about. These are definitely weird, strange times to be a human being. But anyways, enough of that rambling. There's so much to talk about, so much to cover, especially with the new Hasbro live stream that went live a couple of days ago. And I wanted to kind of run down some of the figures that really caught my eye. I'm not going to talk about that X-Men Build-A-Figure wave. This is just going to be the retro carded figures and then obviously the animated series figures. So stay tuned for a later video where we do talk about that X-Men Build-A-Figure wave, which looks phenomenal, by the way. But let's get straight into the figure that really drew my attention the most, which is that retro carded Carnage from the animated series. There's no official date for when the pre-orders are going to go up, but this is supposed to be a Target exclusive here in the US. And for Canada, it will be available through either Toys R Us or whatever fan channel store usually carries your Marvel Legends. This is a very interesting figure. It's 100% reuse from the previous one, which I believe was a part of that Venom Build-A-Figure wave, or I should say it was a part of the Venom Pool Build-A-Figure wave. It was a really well designed action figure. I absolutely loved it. Very solid articulation overall. And then I just loved the symbiote texture on the action figure. It wasn't just painted on from what I remember. It was sculpted on. This is probably my favorite Marvel Legends Carnage action figure at the moment. I know there was a previous version that had slightly less articulation or was a little bit more limited, and then all of these sculpted tendrils were not included with that figure. It was also worth mentioning that I think the original one, or the one prior to this version, did come with a Cassidy head sculpt, so that was meant to be more of Cassidy, whereas in the more recent version from the Venom Pool was meant more to be from like the Absolute Carnage comic book series, because it did include that head sculpt and there was no unmasked head. And also it's worth noting that if you're the kind of guy that loves toes on his symbiote figures, I know there's some people that are on one side and then others that are just completely against toes. So if you're a toe guy, if you love toes on your Carnageized Marvel Legends or just action figures in general, you're gonna love this one. If you're not a big fan of that, then you can just pass on it because, you know, toes. But anyways, let's stop talking about toes. It does come with two alternate hands, or I guess two alternate symbiotic weapons. One is like a battle axe and then one is just like a big giant blade. I'm very interested to see whether these can be ported on to the previous iteration of Carnage released by Hasbro. If they cannot, I am just going to absolutely lose my cool, because then that would mean that they went back, re-engineered the arms just so they wouldn't fit into the older Carnage, and I'm not sure what purpose that would serve. I'm going to assume that the texturing on the weapons themselves would probably not fit in too well with the aesthetic of the older Carnage, but I still think that it should be an option. So like I said, only time will tell. And I have to say, I love that head sculpt for this figure, and I also love the fact that it comes in a retro card. I know we got a VHS animated version, but it didn't come in that beautiful retro card. So hopefully we're able to get our hands on this. It's not too difficult to find. This to me is a must pick up if you are a Spider-Man fan, and even if you're just a casual fan, I think this is one that you cannot miss out on. And actually, before we move on, it's also worth noting that this is on that older body, meaning yes, those fugly pins are going to be there. They're going to be visible. So I'm surprised that they didn't decide to give us a newer body mold, but I think they probably haven't gotten enough reuse from that Venom Pool Carnage. So again, just an easy reuse for them. Don't really have that big of an issue because, like I said, that figure articulated pretty well, so I have no real problems with it. But it's worth noting in case you have a personal vendetta against visible pins. They also announced a Morbius and Dr. Strange VHS 2-pack, which again is supposed to be based on the animated series. And there's a lot of reuse here. If you're a big fan of these characters, it's a must. And I've said this before, the VHS packaging was an absolute genius move from Hasbro, because They can save a ton of money and still play it off like it's meant for the collectors. But again, you're not getting windows. It's just going to be that regular VHS box that you can't see inside. You can't really see the figure. And both Morbius and Doctor Strange are only going to come with 2 alternate hands. And then Doctor Strange comes with a small little plastic effect piece that is supposed to be posed around with when he's using his abilities. So you're essentially getting no accessories, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm going to assume that these figures are going to come at that regular, or which I believe is now the new regular 2-pack in these VHS packaging style boxes, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was around like $54.99. It seems kind of high to me, especially I would think that Hasbro would decide to pass on those savings to the consumer. But if anything, there seems to be somewhat of a markup with these figures. They don't stay at that $24.99 price point. But if there is one saving grace, they are characters that haven't been featured in animated stylings or with the animated paint job. On top of that, it seems like both figures are going to come with the new tech. So yes, they will be pinless action figures. They also announced the brand new Walmart exclusive Prowler action figure. This one's really interesting because at first glance, I thought it was just a reuse of that Lizard Build-A-Figure Prowler. But then I got a closer look at it, and it is using, again, that new body mold, the newer tech, pinless technology, although I think it is reusing the gauntlets as well as the hands, and then that bottom like ankle portion of the figure. It will also come with an unmasked head, which surprisingly seems to fit very well with its source material. And this is one of those characters that I don't mind getting another version of, just because the last couple that have been released did go up quite a bit in price. And then one of them is based on a very specific source material. It looks exactly like it did in the animated film, so it really doesn't fit in with too many displays. This one seems like it could, fit into multiple different collections. So if you're interested in this one, definitely keep an eye on it. The next 2-pack is probably the figures that I am the least excited about. And not for the reasons that you may think. I have no problem with OMs reusing body molds if they're done correctly, and this is the correct way. You're adding value to a display. You're giving different costumes, different iterations of characters, and in some cases you're completing a small little team or a squadron that's usually featured in a few comic book runs here and there. But I just don't understand why they would introduce a new Spider-Man body mold and then reuse it with Deadpool, only to revert back to an old Spider-Man body mold for just apparently no reason. I'm assuming that they're trying to get their money's worth with this body mold, but it makes no sense at this point. If you've already introduced the best Spider-Man body mold, I just don't think the fan base is going to approve of such nonsense. If we're getting a Spider-Man, we need that toe articulation and we need that double lap crunch. It's just an absolute must at this point. And somewhat of a side note, I absolutely love the box art for this. It's based on a comic book cover. It's a really cool nod to its source material. They also showed off their Secret Empire Captain America, and talk about beef. I do remember in some panels or in some comic book covers, he did look pretty hunky, but never this big. It does come with 2 alternate hands as well as a shield, and I'm mostly basing myself off of the promotional images, but the paint job on this looks very intricate. It looks very well done, very well crafted. I'm actually quite impressed by how good this looks. I know it's not everybody's prototypical suit for Captain America, but this is still a very pivotal version in the Marvel comic book universe. And I believe, from what I remember, this is supposed to be some sort of like Walmart exclusive. So same thing, keep your eye on that one, because that one has the potential to sell out when it does go live for pre-order. The last announcement that I wanted to talk about on today's video was very disappointing, somewhat of a letdown for me, because yes, it's another Shield 3-pack. How many different times do they have to use this body mold? And I'm not really that angry about it. It's just not something that appeals too much to me, and it definitely makes sense. I mean, you're going to get a lot of these characters that at one point did join up with Shield, so it makes perfect sense to continue reusing the body mold and just adding different characters. Now we're getting Sharon Stone, we're getting Dum Dum, and Nick Fury Jr. Like I said, nothing really that new. They are using that newer technology, pinless, especially for Sharon Stone, which I believe uses that double jointed elbow, which people were just going absolutely nuts over. Double jointed knees as well, and it comes, or at least it appears that it comes with quite a few accessories. And speaking of getting figures that we have already gotten in the past with just smaller updated features, we're talking about the Baron Zemo and the Arnim Zola 2-pack. Both were released separately at one point, but now are being re-released as a 2-pack. This is supposed to be an Amazon exclusive. Like I said, the last few figures that I mentioned on today's video are not really my cup of tea. They're things that I'm probably going to pass on just because they don't really fit into the aesthetic of my display at the moment, but they're there if you guys want to pick them up. The figures that personally I'm going insane over, or things that for sure I'm going to try to pre-order or pick up in person, have to be that Carnage and Morbius action figure. They're going to fit perfectly into my animated Spider-Man display. Not only that, but honestly, they may be the most perfect representation of each character. I might pick up Morbius. I do have the original Morbius from the Absorbing Man Build-A-Figure, and I honestly feel like it does the job, but I could potentially see myself replacing that figure as well. Like I said, there was also an X-Men wave, but I'll save that for another video because, to be brutally honest, it's already difficult enough editing like a 10-minute video just because I tend to ramble too much, and I honestly end up cutting like half of the video just because I want to be more precise and condense with my content. So we'll save it for another video later down the road. Hopefully I'm able to get around to it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As I said, this was just kind of like not really a summary, but just wanted to let you guys know what figures I am the most excited about. Let me know down below which figures you guys plan on picking up, which ones you guys liked and which ones you didn't. Very curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Thank you guys as always so much for tuning in. Hopefully, if you guys enjoy the content, you hit the like button, subscribe, stay tuned. We have a lot more content coming at you guys. Thank you.